There are growing calls for President Cyril Ramaphosa to crack the whip on errant politicians and government officials. Business Day's editor-at-large, Paton, who wrote an article titled "It's Time for Ramaphosa to End the ANC Protection Racket." And she joins us live now. Carol, a very good morning to you, and thank you very much for making the time to speak to us. I want to talk about the very title of your opinion piece. You say it's time for Ramaphosa to end the ANC Protection Racket. And I want you to speak to us in simple terms what it is that you mean there, and perhaps try and link it to what we are seeing now, which is that ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule appears to have instructed his lawyers to go and find out if there is a possible warrant of arrest against him.
Morning. Thanks very much. Look, I think that one of the kind of tendencies when one looks at everything that's going on with all the, with the kind of extensive corruption we see in South Africa, is to think, well, these are just a few bad apples. These are just a few bad people. And I think that what we've realized over this whole state capture period and even now is that it's not just a few bad people. It's actually the political system lends itself to corruption. And one of the big ways it does this is by party funding. So you can if you're paying the ANC, if you're a funder of the ANC, you can there's a relationship between funding the ANC and winning tenders. And this is exactly what came out of the State Capture Commission when Edwin Sodi was there. And we saw in his evidence how much money he'd actually sent the ANC's way. So because he won such enormous tenders with such huge margins, he has got the money at hand to slip the ANC $3.5 million in February and again in April, which is what he did, I think, in 2014 or 2016. But so my point really is that the ANC does not favor the regulation of party funding because it enables the party to fundraise off the back of people who are getting tenders and contracts with the state. So the proposal is that it's been passed by Parliament, but I've reliably learned that there are kind of steps to try and delay it. But it's been passed by Parliament to say, well, everybody should declare their funding. It's not that Edwin Sodi or anyone else will no longer be allowed to donate to the ANC. They could. It's just that we, the public, would know exactly who's donating to the ANC, and therefore we would know to the law enforcement authorities in particular would know, like, okay, well, here's a guy who seems to have an incredible amount of wealth that he's just suddenly accumulated. So that's the kind of argument, and the reason I called it a protection racket is because it's a kind of it's exactly the same as a protection racket, let's say, at a nightclub. You pay me, or else you're going to be shut out of business, and that's exactly what has been happening.
And you seek to shine the spotlight on the president, Carol, because you also talk about the Political Party Funding Act, which he has signed, but I think what he still needs to sign now is the date upon which it now becomes law. Why is the president sitting on this, you think?
Well, I have asked the presidency that. They responded by saying that there was still some work that Department of Home Affairs needs to do. I am not sure exactly what that is. I have asked Home Affairs about that. But what I can tell you is that, the president assented to the law in January 2019. In March this year, and the IEC had to do a whole lot of things to get ready for this bill, because it has to set up various funds and various processes and structures. And it's done this work, and it met with the president in March this year and informed him that everything was ready to go. He can press the button. why that hasn't happened, as I said, I got an official response from his office saying, well, Home Affairs is still doing this or that. But I don't think that the public should accept that as an option. I mean, it can't take, I know we've had a lockdown, but for it to take, 4 or 5 months, well, the Department of Home Affairs bumbles on, is not acceptable. And especially in the context of the fact that we're going to go into an election next year. There's a local government election. And it's important that this act is in place for when the election takes place.
Let me just jump in there. Final question to you, Carol. The president, it would appear, is dragging his feet here, because I think that's what you essentially alluding to by saying the public should not accept this excuse that something still needs to be done by the Home Affairs Department. Simple question to you is, what does this do for the credibility of the administration of President Cyril Ramaphosa, given that he campaigned on this issue of corruption? For him to stop such things, legislation such as this one that we're discussing has got to be in place and effective.
Absolutely. I think it questions his commitment to corruption. And as we know, clamping down on corruption in the ANC is an incredibly difficult thing. It immediately gives rise to all sorts of factional politics, all sorts of dirt getting pulled out on all sorts of people. And it's bad for the unity of the organization. It causes rifts and it causes problems. So anyone who's trying to hold an organization together, like President Cyril Ramaphosa is trying to do, will find it a very difficult balancing act. He's tried to steer very clear of the NPA and say, well, that's got nothing to do with me. Who gets arrested has got nothing to do with me. And that's a very good thing. We don't want a president who interferes in the NPA. But what we do want is we want a president who says, yes, I am serious enough to sign this act, to assent to this act, to put it into practice, because it's good. It's a good systemic remedy for the kind of corruption we're seeing.
Business Day editor at large, that's Carol Paton, and thank you very much for making the time to speak to us about that important opinion piece she wrote yesterday. All right.